This is The Bandwagon, a podcast about baseball and the frustrating limitations of language when it comes to describing superlatives. I'm Hannah Keyser, a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports, joined as always by Zach Crizer, also a baseball writer at Yahoo Sports. Hi.
Hello.
You always, we're going to start out talking about visual things. Sorry, people who are listening to us. You always wear a hat on this podcast and other places, but always on this podcast. And I did not do anything to my hair to make it look good this morning, and so I put on a hat, and now I feel very weird wearing a hat in my own house. Do you feel weird when you wear a hat in your house?
No, I do not feel weird wearing a hat in my own house. I wear a hat pretty much whenever I'm appearing in any public sense and have not yet showered for the day. Mm-hmm. My hair does not. I do not roll out of bed and look like a normal person with my hair. So basically, I have plans tonight. I have plans with you tonight. We are going to dinner, and so I'm gonna shower before that, and I will not wear a hat after that. But I have not showered yet, and so my hair looks like a stupid person. And so whenever I do not have that condition met, I wear a hat. So I'm pretty much comfortable wearing it wherever. Yes.
I mean, I always wear a hat when I go to the ballpark. You know this. You see me at the ballpark. Anyone who's
and I don't wear a hat to the ballpark. Yeah.
But now I'm in my own apartment, and I feel strange wearing a hat.
Well,
okay.
It's perfectly normal.
They are, to be clear, they are baseball hats. They're not baseball team hats. Mine is not a baseball team hat, but they're baseball hats. So that's somewhat relevant to our podcast. What is your hat, actually? I can't quite tell.
You got it for me. It's a Brooklyn Cyclones hat.
Oh, I did get that one for you.
I also wear neutral hats so that I do not appear to be
biased,
rooting for any one team.
Did I bring you an NPB hat when I was in Japan?
Yes, I have that one too. I think
you should have worn that one for this.
It wasn't the right team. He wasn't on the team.
Oh, okay. Well, later in the pod, we'll be talking about a player who once played for an NPB team. Let's see if you can guess who that is. And we're going to talk about position players pitching. Again, not the one you're thinking of, but also the one you were thinking of, and donut holes. But first, we have some banter. Okay, this is not on the rundown. I did give you a heads up that I had to touch on this. I will keep it short because it's not news. The Cardinals haven't been great. We've discussed the fact that the Cardinals haven't been great. We've also discussed the fact that some of the Cardinals' not greatness seems to not necessarily be caused by their manager, Oli Marmol, but perhaps be exacerbated, not aided by their manager, Oli Marmol.
Just made more dramatic.
More dramatic, yeah. And the Cardinals were in New York City recently, and New York Times baseball writer Tyler Kepner took this as an opportunity to write about the Cardinals. How are they feeling about their struggles, and how are they going to go on from here? And the lead of the story is an effort to kind of, a New York Timesy lead way, an effort to do a brief little non-baseball anecdote that mirrors some of what's happening on the field. And baseball writer Tyler Kepner wrote about the fact that Oli Marmol told him that while he was in New York, he wanted to get a bagel, but couldn't. It failed. And the upshot was if you're the Cardinals in 2023, just everything goes wrong, even trying to get a bagel. And I think Oli Marmol should not have copped to failing to get a bagel in New York City. I don't even know how you would fail to get a bagel in New York City. His explanation was the line was really long, and it's there's 1,000 bagel stores and they're all very dense. They're very close to one another. Seamless exists. I don't know. There's no upshot. I texted you this. That was several days ago. And since then, I have continued to think about the fact that, I did not know that we needed to make it a prerequisite for being named a major league manager, that you have to complete a relatively straightforward task, but in a city where you're not comfortable. That's the thing that comes up a lot as a major league manager. But they should make that a prerequisite. They should send you to a city that you do not live in, task you with accomplishing something small. I don't know, faxing something, acquiring a specific food. And if you can't do it, I'm sorry. This is such a rude, I want this to be less rude to Oli Marmol than it sounds, but how come you couldn't get a bagel? That's all. Thoughts? reactions?
I think he ran into the age-old New York City problem of there was a long line and he didn't know how long it would take. But this is another, that is just a hurdle to be cleared. And it seems like when you are the manager of a baseball team, I bet there was someone in the organization below him who would have happily acquired him a bagel.
Yes.
So
delegate.
perhaps
Great
delegation.
Call. Great call.
Was
either
the move.
He needs to either work on his problem solving or his delegation, and either one of those would have accomplished, or his planning ahead. Problem solving, planning ahead, delegation, all things. Being able to pivot if you need to, having backups, having contingency plans, knowing about more than one bagel shop, all of these would be good life lessons for managers to learn. Okay. Now we're going to talk about something less fun, which is that Rob Manfred had a press conference last week. We're late to this because it was last week. But he touched on a lot of things that are newsy. I was there. You were not. Do you have any questions?
How sarcastic and spiky was the quote where he commended the A's in clear backhanded compliment form for achieving about an average MLB crowd with their reverse boycott?
Right. So the press conference, totally incidentally, came 2 days after the reverse boycott and 1 day after the Nevada legislature approved whatever it was that they need to approve to fund a stadium. So, of course, Manfred was asked about a lot of A's things, including the reverse boycott. And he said it was great. It was great to see what is this year almost an average Major League Baseball crowd in the facility for one night. How sarcastic was it? In another setting, I would commend Rob Manfred on his deadpan delivery because it was totally smooth. I actually think this is like genuinely very interesting. I saw that Evan Drellick at The Athletic, who writes a lot about Rob Manfred because he covers the business of baseball, not only wrote up this press conference, but then over the weekend did a column sort of like reckoning with Rob Manfred's condescension like across the board, just because his tone, that particular comment really stood out to people because the tone comes across even in writing. And Evan took this as an opportunity to sort of consider like, why is Rob so dismissive, so rude, so sarcastic? And I thought landed on like exactly the correct answer, which is that he is a fighter. He was a labor lawyer, and in the past he's like made specific reference to like his sort of tenacity. I enjoy these press conferences a lot because, but I kind of see myself in Rob Manfred in the way he deals with these, which is that like I understand his desire to win what he feels is a combative verbal sparring. Like he kind of like can't help himself from needing to win the immediate kind of like back and forth with the reporter. And like almost every time it's every time you've seen some like seemingly wildly rude, inappropriate, condescending comment for Rob go viral, it's because of that. Like he's a lawyer to his core. Like he needs to kind of like and you see this with the way that he did it in this press conference, and he's obviously done it to worse effect in the past. He's said the phrase like I disagree with the premise of that question or whatever. Like he's so confident in his ability to twist the language or sort of like use the phrasing or the verbiage or sort of pick up on like a tiny little clause in the question that he can like run with, and he thinks he can win at in a way that just like completely misunderstands the assignment of being the commissioner, which is to like deliver not even necessarily the answer, but some positive message. I mean, that's why I like the thing that I enjoy about these press conferences is that Rob can't help himself from answering the question. Like he doesn't just sort of say a predetermined platitude about Oakland. He has to spar, he has to engage with the thing that he feels challenged on, which is like, what did you think about the boycott or whatever? And in that way, we often get more insight than perhaps he intended to let on.
Right. I think he has the very kind way of putting this is that he has redefined the job around his strengths, which is fighting legal battles to win his side the most, money. It's mostly money.
Right.
And he's been exceedingly good at that. The problem is that redefining the commissioner job that way has made everyone except the 30 owners hate him.
Yeah.
And he's the face of the sport in the business sense. Whether he wants that to be true or not, I think he'd love if it weren't true, but it just is. Right. And so people think of, both fans, players, think of Rob Manfred as the face of MLB, and that is not a positive thing usually when he has press conferences like this where his interest is so aligned with the billionaire owners who most people just can't really relate to that it comes off poorly. And I think there are a lot of ways in which his fighting is good. He fought through a lot of criticism to instill the rule changes that people do like now once they've seen them. We've talked about how he's fighting blackouts, perhaps, as part of the regional TV thing. It just seems like he would be better at his old job, where he was the league's top lawyer. And if someone else were doing the front-facing commissioner face of the league part, that's not a choice that we have anymore. But it just, in his lack of willingness or ability, one or the other, to change that part of how he deals with things, he's just given this job a different feel than I think people were familiar with, and certainly than most people would like it to have.
Right. We'll focus on the Vegas stuff to close this out. I just want to say, I'm sure we're going to talk about this more, but put a question out there and we can engage with it later, which is, does Vegas want a baseball team? Because it does feel like we've vastly skipped over this. One of the things he did say in that was it has always been baseball's policy and preference to stay put. And I, like I do with actually a lot of the things he says, I believe him that is true. And it doesn't feel like, aside from the obvious, money, John Fisher sucks. It doesn't feel like there's a compelling reason to go to Vegas in particular. And so at some point we should engage with a topic that is I know you've written about Vegas as a baseball destination from a on-field perspective, but also just I haven't heard of anyone in Vegas. There's no grassroots organization as far as I know that's bring baseball to Vegas in the same way that there is in a lot of cities that have been considered for expansion. And so even setting aside how we feel about the A's leaving Oakland, Vegas seems like a strange choice. Okay, so let's get into a segment that we're calling Built Different, powered by Ram Trucks. Sometimes you see a guy whose performance is game-changing and think, oh, he's just built different. Zach, who amazed you this week?
Lamont Wade Jr. So, the Giants' first baseman, who you may recall from their magical 2021 season as Late Night Lamont, he has not been hitting just a ridiculously high proportion of walk-off hits or anything. That's not his thing this year. But he has actualized the way he kind of was in the minors, which is he's pretty much got Juan Soto level plate discipline of he just never swings at balls. He doesn't swing a lot at strikes. He takes a lot of pitches to get the exact pitch he wants or to take a walk. And he's done that to great effect this year. He's been one of the 25 or so best hitters in baseball, after really having a down year last year that made it look maybe like the rest of the Giants, maybe 2021 was a fluke, that 107 win year. Maybe that was just a moment in time and it's all gone and they have to kind of reshuffle the lineup to get back to contention. Well, they're back. They have won 8 games in a row. Last night it was late night little Yaz. Mike Yastrzemski went walk-off against the Padres into the Bay. And the Giants are in second place in the NL West. They would be in a playoff spot if the season ended today. And Wade is just a nice little avatar of how they're doing that, which is They are not necessarily getting Aaron Judge level performances, which is, clearly what they were hoping they might sign this offseason. But they are finding ways to be a really competitive team and put it together in, situational hitting, being good at kind of the finer aspects of things. So I think he has been a nice little signal of, okay, the Giants are once again contenders. It wasn't just 2021.
I still think that 2021 Giants was like one of the more interesting baseball stories that kind of got lost to the postseason. Like when we went into that postseason, I was like, man, I hope they go far enough that we continue to talk about that team. And then they didn't. And we kind of stopped talking about that team. So excited about that. Also, I texted you this and I was like, should we try to come up with like a conceit for this week's Built Different? And then rather than do that, I was just like, I want to talk about Blake Snell. And you helpfully pointed out that the Padres are facing the Giants. So that's our conceit for this week, yes. That the Padres are facing the Giants. But I want to talk about Blake Snell because he's been really good after being not so good. And also it coincides with the Padres being better. I was going to say they were really good. And then literally just that one loss to the Giants last night made it harder to say that. I was going to point out, like, wow, they made it all the way back up to 500 after losing 9-10 in mid-May. But they didn't make it all the way back up to 500 because little Yaz. But Blake Snell has been incredible. He has made 5 starts. So the Padres lost 9 of 10 in mid-May. At that point, they were like 6 games under 500. Since then, they've been significantly better, but not enough better to get to 500 because of the Giants. But in that time, Blake Snell has made 5 starts with an ERA of 0.60. I had like kind of been aware of this. I knew Padres were generally doing better, and I knew that their pitching was a big part of why they were doing better. And then over the weekend, I watched Blake Snell's first start against the Tampa Bay Rays since he got traded from the Tampa Bay Rays, because I'm very emotionally invested in that particular storyline because I enjoy both Blake Snell and the Tampa Bay Rays. And he was phenomenal. He was so good. He allowed 2 hits across 6 scoreless innings, struck out 12, 1 shy of his career high. And it caused me to look up his splits and see that in April and May, he was not great. In April and May, he had an April and March, and then he had an ERA of 5.48. And then in May, it was down to 3.82. And then in June, it is 0.47. So I think good Blake Snell is like a fantastic example of a pitcher in this game. Like, he's just like a weird dude with overpowering stuff. Like, it's just I also just like, in the same way that you kind of feel like, oh, I don't want the Giants of 2021 to be a fluke. I don't want Cy Young winning Blake Snell to be a fluke, even though it was like significantly longer ago. That was 2019. I'm glad that he is good again. I also just think it's like going to help the Padres a lot. Like, it really felt like when Snell wasn't that good, and also like the lineup wasn't looking great, it felt like, wow, the Padres, what did they think this was going to work with their pitching in particular? And now he's looking great again. And Joe Musgrove is back after he dropped the thing on his foot. And so in general, the Padres looking more compelling.
Gary Sanchez and Blake Snell being the powerhouses carrying the Padres back into contention is some real what year is it stuff. Yes. But yes, he has been better. I'm interested to see if he continues the pattern and has like a -1 ERA in August. That's totally possible, right?
Also, it's his walk year. So, right? Yeah. So I know you were thinking about doing a story on how guys do in their contract years, and how they do is they pull it together. If it doesn't start out great, they're like, oh my God, this would be a very costly time to have the worst season of your career. So yeah, you should talk to Blake Snell about pulling it together for his contract year. Okay, that was Built Different, powered by Ram Trucks, built to serve. And now we're going to play a game. It was my turn to build a game. As we have unsubtly hinted at, we're going to talk about Shohei Ohtani in our main segment. And so for our game, we're playing a game called Not So Easy, Is It? Position Players Pitching. Non-Shohei Ohtani edition.
I'm glad the Not So Easy Is It is about them and not for me, but maybe it's not so easy for me either.
I might not be. This is also a little bit, this is inspired both by Shohei Ohtani and by Brandon Crawford, who actually said it was easy. He said, I always give pitchers a hard time about it not being that hard. And I think I proved that it's not today because he finally got to pitch, which had been like a career-long dream of his, and it was a scoreless inning. So this is about position players pitching who are neither Shohei Ohtani nor Brandon Crawford. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Among active players, Shohei Ohtani is first in position player strikeouts, as you might imagine. One of his current teammates is second. Who is it?
One of his current teammates is second. Oh,
It didn't come this year, if that helps, but is an active player.
Is it Gio Urshela?
No, I'm sorry. It is Jared Walsh, who struck out in 5 innings, all in 2019. Okay. Among active players, Shohei Ohtani is first in position player innings, as you might imagine. The player who is second made 10 appearances in relief last year for the Dodgers, and after signing a minor league deal with a new team this year, got into a game as a reliever before he ever had an at-bat. Is it, and we have options for you here.
Oh, okay.
Brett Phillips, Hanser Alberto, Mike Ford, Mike Brosseau.
It's Hanser Alberto.
Yes, it is. Good job. Did you know that without the options?
I did.
Oh, I shouldn't have given options for that one. That was for the Dodgers last year and the White Sox this year. He has a career 7.07 ERA. All right. Among active players, Shohei Ohtani is first in position player wins, as you might imagine. Who is the only other active position player to record a win as a pitcher? Is it Carson Kelly, Sandy Leon, Luis Guillerme, or Luis Torrens?
I thought the last position player to record a win was Chris Davis from the Orioles, who is not active.
Yes,
so
he did record a win.
This is not going to be good. I think it might be Luis Torrens.
It is. He is currently of the Cubs, but his win came last year in a 2-inning.
The Mariners.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, you should get a bonus point for that. Okay. We have now left the Shohei Ohtani section of this quiz.
Okay.
All right. Cody Clemens has already thrown 9.2 innings in less than a season and a half. Because probably name recognition goes pretty far when they're looking for a position player to pitch. Estimate his ERA to the nearest integer.
The nearest integer?
Yeah. I mean,
I'll go with 8.
It is 3.72.
Oh, wow. The bloodlines really do help.
For a bonus, estimate Roger Clemens' career ERA to the nearest integer.
I think it's also 3.
It is. Okay, yeah. So Cody, I was like shocked by that. Cody Clemens' current career ERA, 3.72. Roger Clemens' career ERA, 3.12. In August 2021, Brock Holt, so not current position player active, but Brock Holt threw the slowest pitch to be called a strike in the StatCast era. What decade of speed was it? What, 10?
I can do better than a decade, I think. I think it was 37 miles an hour.
Shouldn't have said you could do better than a decade because it was 31.1, but we will give it to you.
That is within the same decade.
It is, but I'm saying you shouldn't have said you could do better because you couldn't. You couldn't do better.
Yeah,
you could just do the 30s.
Yeah.
All right. But of the 10 slowest pitches to be called strikes in the StatCast era, one Baltimore outfielder is responsible for 5 of them. Is it Anthony Santander, Ryan McKenna, Austin Hayes, Cedric Mullins?
I think it's Austin Hayes.
No, it's Ryan McKenna. It's always the random guy who's not good at something else, but I had to include him because it's the answer to the question.
The lob just really took over recently, and
yes.
I need. That's another story that's in my to-do list.
Well, on the flip side, Royals utility player Nate Eaton came into a game against the Rangers earlier this year and somewhat famously looked really good. He gave up 2 hits, no runs, striking out 1 in an inning. He also threw harder than the man who had started the game, Zach Greinke. To the nearest integer, how fast was his fastest pitch?
94.
95. Oh, close. Greinke topped out at 91.3. I'm not going to give it to you.
He's going to the Hall of Fame.
I know. This year, Major League Baseball tightened the rules once again about when non-two-way designated position players can pitch because of the incredible rise of this phenomenon. In 2008, this was like the most shocking part to me. In 2008, there were just 3 position player pitching appearances. In 2019, that was up to 90. Last year, it dipped all the way back to 89. And 2022 set a new high at, okay, how many instances of position players pitching did we see last year? Was it 105, 132, 149 or 200?
132.
It was 132. Good job. Huge uptick. Huge uptick from 89 in 21. Okay. This is the last question. It is a 2-part question. Last month, in a game between the Blue Jays and the Rays, Luke Raleigh came in to pitch and later said, "Everyone, you might think it's fun to be out there, but it's scary at the same time." And he didn't just mean that he gave up 7 runs in 1.2 innings. He meant literally. In fact, even on the 1 strikeout he recorded, he ducked for fear that he would get hit with a comebacker. This is a 2-part question. Who did he strike out?
Oh, Brandon Belt.
I'm going to give you a hint. We'll see if you can do it better. As a hint, that same player hit a grand slam off him in the next inning.
That's not helping at all. Vlad Jr.
Yes, it was Vlad Guerrero Jr. The strikeout came at a pitch that was thrown at a perfect multiple of 10 speed. How fast was that pitch that struck out Vlad Guerrero Jr.?
50.
That's exactly correct. Wow, you did better at this quiz than I thought you were going to do. Producer John, how did Zach do on our quiz of position players pitching? You did.
I'll just tell you guys because it's easier because there was a lot of bonus questions and second parts to the question. So all in all, I think there was 11 questions asked of Zach, and apparently it was easy because he got 7 of them correct.
Wow, that's pretty good. The Hanser Alberto one, shouldn't have given you choices because I thought for sure.
That was a Twitter phenomenon last year where the Dodgers beat was always tweeting about Hanser Alberto pitching, so it kind of stuck in my head.
I had a lot of fun building that quiz, looking into position players pitching. We are not going to debate it right now, but for the record, I like position players pitching. I know everybody's out on position player pitches, but I'm like, what else are they doing in those blowout games? And they're going to keep playing them, so they might as well do something fun. We might as well get a game out of it. Okay. We're going to take a quick break and come back with a conversation about the best player in baseball. Okay, so we have to talk about Shohei Ohtani.
Yes.
And as alluded to in the cute little intro bit that I do, it's tough to talk. Like, everyone who talks about Shohei Ohtani now feels the need to provide some caveat, which we are now also going to do. That's like, what can you even say about Shohei Ohtani? Everything has been said. And it's true. We've already called him a unicorn and the best player in baseball, and he's already won MVP. And he's been compared to Babe Ruth so much that then people started to be like, actually, we shouldn't stop comparing him to Babe Ruth because what he's doing is cooler than what Babe Ruth is doing. And so there kind of is nothing left to say except that he's still doing it. He is not pitching as well as he has in the past, but he's hitting even better than he ever has, including in his MVP 2021 season. You wanted to talk about two-way players of the future, potentially.
I wanted to talk about whether we think anyone else will actually ever do anything like this. Because I think, Ohtani I'm kind of torn between 2 things. There's Ohtani as just this singular, no one did it before, no one's done it since, like, just he's one of one and that's it. I think that is one interesting way this could be, but I actually think I lean a little bit more toward Ohtani did this and proved it could be done, and then at some, point in the future, the ripple effect gets far enough down that we have, 3 to 5 of these in the league at any given time, and they are all sort of competing to be the best version of a two-way player. And I think that would be, my maximal level of interest is if there were 5 of them and there was some competition to be the best type of two-way player. I've always been interested in whether you could have a two-way player who's like Ohtani as a hitter, but comes in as the highest leverage reliever for a team and is amazing at that too. I think that could be a really interesting way to use them. So, all that's to say, I'm interested in the Shohei Ohtani ripple effect if it ever comes to fruition. And there's pretty much ever since Ohtani has gotten to the big leagues, there's been like one or two guys either in college or in high school who are interested in trying it. And so far, they have all failed. But, we're pretty early in the Ohtani experience. So
I'm trying to think if I would be more interested in no one ever succeeding at doing it again or having other people succeed and do it. I think it would be really a bummer. Like, in some ways, the most likely outcome is that someone or someone's, like, multiple people get all the way to the majors trying it, and then they're just not actually as good as Shohei Ohtani as at either of these, because, and this is where we take the opportunity to once again emphasize how incredible Shohei Ohtani is. Like, what makes Shohei Ohtani singular and not just interesting is that he is one of the best at both of the things that he does. I say that like it's news to anyone, and it's not. I get that. But my point is that, like, of all the people playing baseball in the world right now at the college level and the high school level and the minor league level and the youth level and the independent league level, of all of those people, like three of them are as good or are going to be as good someday as Shohei Ohtani is at, like, any part of baseball. And that aspect of it is, like, what we have to kind of, like, constantly remind ourselves of, that, like, it's really, really cool that he's doing two-way things. And I agree with you that, like, the two-way experiment expanding into a more consistent genre of baseball discourse and content, and, like, right, like, what's the best way to do it if he wants to be a reliever, and what's the best way to do it if he is a catcher too? I don't know. You mean like all the sort of various aspects, but the part of it, but in some ways that'll be kind of like a letdown, because it'll never be, like, we could just say like, it will never be again that it's a guy who could win an MVP and a Cy Young like that, because there's just aren't that many of them to begin with. Like, it's like only a handful of people who are that good at baseball, just hitting wise.
Right. And I think if Ohtani does someday win the Cy Young, which I don't think that's going to be this year, but, if he completes that duo of having both an MVP and a Cy Young, if he does it in the same season, that would really be another level. But I don't necessarily think, I don't know that we'll ever see that again. Certainly not in our lifetimes. But I think, an all-star level two-way player who's could be very good and very interesting without being, Ohtani is pretty clearly one of the 20 best hitters and one of the 20 best pitchers in the game at the same time, which is hard to fathom. And he just is. He just is. That's true. He is. And so I think, the one thing he doesn't do right now is field. If you saw someone come through who actually did the fielding part, that could be an additional level of interest, but it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. The most notable case right now coming up through the amateur levels is Florida's Jack Caglianone. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Jeff Passan profiled him this week ahead of the Men's College World Series. So I think it's really interesting to watch, but all of it goes back to just emphasizing how ridiculous Ohtani is. And he's ridiculous in an important way for the actual MLB season right now, because the Angels have risen up to second place in the AL West.
Yeah. So I also read the ESPN story about Jack Caglianone, the best Shohei Ohtani heir to the Shohei Ohtani. And what stood out to me about that was, like, you just can't know in college. So you and I were talking about this a little bit. Like, this guy is doing it right now, and he has all the motivation and sort of commitment, and Passan takes pains to sort of stress how deliberate they're being with, like, his week and his body, and, like, how he manages his time and how he manages his workload and everything. And he says in that story, I don't really see me really stopping unless a team flat out tells me down the road I've got to pick one or makes a decision for me. I have no interest in stopping whatsoever. That is sort of doing both of these things. But a couple of years ago, we did a episode of Bandwagon, the video series, looking into sort of whether or not anyone could do the Shohei Ohtani again. This is like early on in Shohei Ohtani. This was before we even knew how incredible he was going to be. And the thing that really stood out to me from that, which involved like talking to people in college and around the game and in the minors and stuff, is that even if it could be done, so even if this guy, Jack, in college, I'm going to just call him Jack because I don't feel confident in how we're pronouncing his last name. Our guy, Jack. Even if he has sort of the capabilities to do this, the minor leagues kind of filter you into one path or another. And not just because they're like, you got to choose, son. It's because, and this is the thing that like was like a light bulb moment for me when someone said it to me, because the minors consist of multiple levels. And unless your skills on both sides of the ball advance at exactly the same rate, there's going to be an opportunity for you to get promoted on one side of the baseball before necessarily there's a chance to get promoted on both sides of the baseball. And at that point, your skills will start to diverge. So like if you're in single A, even if you're batting like 260 in single A, but if you're throwing like 98 and missing bats, they're going to be like, hey, would you like to move up a level and just pitch a lot more? And you have to, maybe this guy is the guy who's going to say like, no, I'd like to just continue to stay here working on my like pitch recognition in the box skills. But it's tough to do that when you have the chance to like get promoted and be a Major League Baseball player, because baseball players' careers are really short. The minor leagues, even with a new CBA, don't pay especially well. And the ability to kind of like hone your craft is enhanced at every level and with every sort of new set of coaches and technology and everything. And so even if you are someone who like objectively in a vacuum, if we could know every possible version of timeline human history, could have done both, it's tough to end up doing both in a professional sense. Yeah, just because you like the thing about Ohtani is he didn't work his way up through the minors. Famously came over from Japan, where someone wasn't saying to him like, hey, if you're willing to specialize now, your chances of making it to the majors by the end of the year just kind of skyrocket.
And even in Japan, his team was kind of out on a limb for letting him learn the way he did. That, you know, the only reason he was good with the Nippon Ham Fighters was that they were good with the two-way experiment and were willing to let him do it. So even over there, it's not a given that you'll have the leeway to do that. It was just a slightly more forgiving setup than you have in the American rungs of professional ball.
I know that we have talked a couple times about like, well, first of all, the Angels are not going to trade Ohtani, right? We agree? The Angels are not going to trade Ohtani?
I do not think they're going to trade Ohtani, especially not right now with the way this division is shaping up.
The Angels are not going to trade Shohei Ohtani. I'm sorry. How do you think I know you've thought about this, like, you think like, oh, if the Angels make the postseason, that increases Shohei Ohtani's chance of staying in Anaheim. And if they don't, he's definitely gone. Do you think that's still true? Like, are they good enough that even if they, I don't know, are one game away, like fall one game short of the wild card, do you think this season has created a compelling case for you and also potentially for Shohei Ohtani, although we cannot know his heart, that it can be done, that the Angels, like, that this is, you know what, maybe run it back and next year they could make the postseason, even if they don't do it this year?
I don't think it's created the case yet. I think they have to just shoot to make it this year and put all the eggs in that basket. They have this week passed the Astros in the AL West, which is, you know, feels like a bigger deal than it should feel like, but it you know, the Astros have been dominating them and that division for years and years and years. So that's notable in and of itself. They are facing the Dodgers this week at pretty much the lowest moment the Dodgers have had since 2018, maybe before that. So if they can keep being competitive and add at the deadline and maybe make it into October and see where the chips fall there, I think that makes a huge difference. I think half a season where they're competitive and not even like leading the division or anything, I don't think that sways Ohtani, and I don't think it moves the needle. I think we are thoroughly in the build-up where he gets his hopes up right now, and the ultimate outcome of the season is going to be whether those hopes amount to something or whether they are crushed again by the Angels-ness of the Angels.
The Angels, as we speak, they're in wild card position, and in fact, they are one game up on the Yankees, who are also in wild card position. So it goes the wild card teams as of right now in the American League go Orioles, Angels, Yankees. However, there are 4 more teams, 3 games or less behind them. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting. Are you more interested in, sorry, now I'm just like asking you how you feel about different content things. Are you more interested in how the rest of this season plays out for Shohei Ohtani, or are you more interested in how his free agency plays out for Shohei Ohtani?
I think they're so intertwined. I'm not interested in the free agency yet. I'm interested in his feelings about the Angels because he just does not give us that for a lot of reasons. We don't have that great an insight into his thoughts and feelings about the team that he chose to go to and that he has been great with. It's not like the Angels have been dragging him down. They just have dragged themselves down to where he doesn't get to play in the playoffs. And that whole phenomenon in his head is what I'm interested in. And I think this season and whether they can make it goes pretty much directly to that point. So I actually feel like we talk about this every week. So I'm going to start. We need like a Shohei Ohtani stay-o-meter.
Yeah.
Let's say 0 is he is no longer on the Angels.
Yes.
1 is it's very apparent he wants to leave the Angels. And 10 is he's going to sign with the Angels or he has re-signed with the Angels for the rest of his career. I think right now the Ohtani stay-o-meter is pretty much a perfect perpendicular 5.
I was going to say 4. So yes, like where I'm like, free agency teams, people often leave, and I couldn't agree with you more that I think there's so like we see people jumping ahead and it's fine, whatever. People love to talk about free agency. It gets clicks, but like there's so much content that's like, where's Shohei Ohtani going to play in 2024? And I agree with you. I'm kind of like, I don't know, Shohei Ohtani in 2023 is pretty interesting, both as an individual player and on an Angels team that hasn't been in the postseason in a really long time and is looking better than ever. And even the like Perry Manazian, their GM of it all, like I'm kind of like, is Perry actually like a good GM? And this has been in the works for a while, and it takes a few years for like the GM's influence to trickle down and actually affect the major league team. Yeah, I completely agree. Also, you're right. Why did he choose the Angels? How come we never got a super satisfying answer to that?
I don't know, but if the Billy Epler, the GM of the Mets, I imagine that if things don't work out with the Mets, he will have a robust market for his services this winter for precisely about 2 months until Shohei Ohtani makes his decision, because whatever Billy Epler said to Shohei Ohtani...
Great point.
Excellent job, Billy, on that.
Great point. Billy Epler is going to keep his job in New York just by being like, actually, there was a magic word that I said, and I won't tell it to anyone.
I do not think Billy Epler. I think Billy Epler is not in danger. I'm not trying to say that.
Yes.
I think that is a signature achievement, and a lot of people would be interested in having his services during the Ohtani sweepstakes.
I thought you were going to say that if he lost his job, he could make a killing off writing a tell-all of how those negotiations
that would also work.
That would also work.
Yeah,
again, Billy, we don't think you're going to lose your job. We are just reminding people that you were at the helm of the Angels when they signed Shohei Ohtani, and that, if nothing else, is a feather in your cap. Okay, what are you bandwagoning?
Okay, so maybe the most incredible player that is not Shohei Ohtani in the majors this year is Luis Arraez, who is the second baseman for the Miami Marlins, who, as of this morning, Tuesday, June 20th, is batting 400. I just wrote an article about this that will be up at Yahoo Sports by the time this podcast comes out, and Arraez is already by batting 400 as of today, he's got the second latest 400 average in the season of the millennium so far. He just tied Chipper Jones from 2008 at 73 games in, Marlins games in. And the only one who went further was Nomar Garciaparra in 2000 with the Red Sox. He took it to 91 games. If you go back to all the way to Ted Williams in 1941, which, remember, totally different game when he hit 406. No one's hit 400 since then. The majors weren't integrated. Just all sorts of reasons why the competition was lesser then. The furthest anyone has gone in a season where they've had a 400 average was George Brett in 1980 with the Royals, and he made it to 134 games. So Arráez would need to have a 400 average on or after August 31st to match that. So he's already doing something crazy historic, and I want to talk about the specific way he is doing it, which is donut holes. And I do not mean that he loves Dunkin' Donuts donut holes, although those are good, and especially producer John did not know that there are jelly donut holes, and there are. There are also jelly mini beignets at most French bakeries. Those are also great. They don't call them donut holes because they're classy. Donut hole is obviously a bakery concept, but it's also a baseball concept. The donut hole, if you look at batted ball metrics, can be explained as basically it's the gap between doing a bad thing and doing a good thing, where actually doing a worse thing is better. So if you take a ball that is hit at a 20-degree angle, that's pretty good, right? That's what hitters are going for. So if you hit the ball at 80 miles an hour, which is bad, that's not what you're aiming for most of the time. There's an 823 batting average on those. If you hit it at 90 miles an hour, there's a 301 batting average on those, which is pretty much just normal. That's like the league BABIP. If you hit it at 95 miles an hour, which is what everyone's going for, 279. So Arráez hits a lot of balls in the donut hole, which is not that great, but good enough to get over the infield and fall before the outfielder gets to it.
Okay. I'm trying to I just think that it's going to be really cool when he hits 400 and everybody doubted him. I think it's very interesting that at the outset of this, you're already shaking your head. You're like, it's not going to happen. And I think I just like that. I cite this all the time. There's like some like scientific phenomenon that's like unlikely things are very likely to happen if you consider every possible unlikely thing. It's like each individual unlikely thing is unlikely to happen, but the chances of something wild like Shohei Ohtani happening are actually pretty great, because like there's a lot of things that would fall into the category of making us go like, wow, that was so unlikely. And I kind of feel like Luis Arraez hitting 400 is one of those things, which is like everyone is so like it is extremely unlikely to happen. And I'm like, I agree with you, but someone's gonna hit 400 or hit 75 home runs or have an ERA of 0 for the, like at some point, you know what I mean? It's like there's like so many baseball players and so many baseball seasons and so many individual baseball seasons that something weird is going to happen. And if this is the weird thing, we're going to have seen it coming.
Yeah, I think, I hope he does it. I hope the power of the donut hole skill propels him to hitting 400. I was looking at era-adjusted stats on Fangraphs. They do plus stats that let you kind of neutralize the field and see how weird a stat line is in any given season. He could very well have the most impressive MLB batting average season of all time without hitting 400.
Yeah.
So right now, his batting average is 60% better.
Or batting
pretty
average
much.
Plus, batting average
That's
plus.
another thing I could bandwagon. Yes. His average plus is 160, which means he's 60% better than the league average batting average, which is nuts. That's the best that anyone, it would be the best anyone's ever had in a full MLB season. There are actually a couple of Negro League players who did this in the Negro major leagues that had it better, but in smaller samples than Arráez has already had. So Arráez is a 160, and I think, the best one over a full season was Ted Williams in 1957, actually, not his 1941 406 season. So I think Arráez could drop below 400 and still have the best average season, the most impressive average season in baseball history. And I think we should be prepared to celebrate that. Even if he doesn't hit 400, we should not view it as a disappointment, because this is an insane skill he has.
It's true. At some point, we should start talking in terms of batting average plus, which Brian Kenny on MLB Now constantly brings up. In fact, I've definitely been on like multiple iterations of that show where he's talked about Luis Arraez specific to that. And it's true. It's like at some point we should switch to talking that way, just so we do have an appreciation for the singularityness of this skill. I was just checking. Last year, he won the batting title with batting 316. Mm-hmm. So like, if he bats 350, we're going to be like, oh, wow, I didn't hit 400. What it is. It's like, no, that's crazy. All right. That's been fun. That's all we've got for you this week. Thanks again to our presenting sponsor, Ram Trucks. Make sure you're following both of us on Twitter. I am at Hannah R. Keyser. He is at Z Crizer. Again, there is going to be a Luis Arráez story coming later today. Make sure and if you've made it this far, subscribe to the podcast and the YouTube channel where you can see our hats. Zach always wears a hat. I don't always, but he has a lot of hats, so he cycles through them. Leave us a 5-star review of our hats. Tell a friend, and we'll be back next week with another episode of The Bandwagon.